Hey folks, we had some minor problems with our audio issues on today's episode, so please bear in mind and give us some forgiveness. This was one of the first episodes that we recorded almost 6 months ago, and we've improved our technology since then. Thanks for your patience. Welcome to the Legendarium Green Team. I'm your host, Kyptan, and with me today are Eradandis.
Hello.
And Little Red Book.
Hello.
Today, we'll be discussing The Uplift War, the 1987 science fiction classic by David Brin, and the third published book of the Uplift Saga. It received both the Hugo and Locus Awards for Best Novel and was nominated for the Nebula. It's my personal favorite of the first three, and I'm thrilled to be able to talk about it with all of you. In case you haven't listened to our episode introducing the Uplift Saga, we're starting our episodes with Startide Rising because we believe it's where the series really starts to shine, but the first three books can be read in any order. We'll be starting this episode with general notes about the setting and themes of the book without spoilers, then we'll transition into full spoiler talk with a warning. Okay, so let's get things started off. First impressions. How did this book hit you? Who are you going to recommend it to? What other books did it make you think of? What were your favorite parts without spoiling anything? And what parts would you mention to try and hook people in?
So I'm going to go with something a little unconventional. I'm going to say if you like Dances with Wolves, you'd probably like this book because it has some very similar things going on. I have two favorite scenes, and I think I can say this without spoiling, and Kip can yell at me if I spoil. There's a scene where a dude runs down a deer, basically. And this is actually something that people can really do. Like, human beings do this or did this.
This book is where I learned this.
Yes, but
as
it's
a kid.
true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is true. It's absolutely true.
And so I love that scene. There's some really cool plants that basically all the plants on the planet seem connected. And I thought that was a really cool concept. So those are my two favorite things. And that was hard, by the way, because I like all of the things in this book.
Very much read. I'd say, gosh, who would I recommend it to? Anybody who likes reading, I would recommend it to them. I mean, when you read Uplift War, well, first of all, I guess background-wise, Bryn is he's a scientist, that's his background, but then also on top of that, unfairly, he's also this super brilliant writer. And he has this ability to write seriously and humorously and very engagingly while still packing in a lot of real science elements in his science fiction book. It's really an incredible achievement. It really, really is. And I want to go back to an earlier point you said, Kip, about him being a Hugo Award winner. I mean, this is the 40-pound trophy of Hugo Award winners. Do you want to go over kind of what books were also published in 1987?
Oh, I don't want to go over it. That's up to you.
Okay, well, put it this way. Go and Google books that were released in 1987, and you're going to be wondering, this is the book that won. There was a lot of really good writers. Gene Wolfe published that. Bear published. There were a lot of really headers that published that year, and the Uplift War is the one that won it. So, I mean, to me, that's the recommendation for it. In terms of favorite scenes, I'm just going to highlight one character. I'm going to say any scene with him. Fiben. Any scene with Fiben. He is awesome. To me, he's the hero of the story. Anything with him, if you see something that says Fiben, that's my favorite part.
Interesting.
He was my favorite character too, by the way.
Really?
Yes.
Okay. I'm an Athaclina fan.
I'm not saying she wasn't great. She was great. I'm just saying.
Look, okay, there's many characters in this book which you can fall in love with. There's Fiben, there's Athaclina, there's Uther Caldane. I've got a soft spot for him.
He's great too. Yeah.
There's Galet Jones. There's Sylvie.
Oh my gosh.
Can I say this? Because I think this is important. This is one of the very few books where even when you're in the point of view of the antagonist of the story, there was never a part of the book that I'm like, gosh, can we skip this?
Right.
All of it was fascinating. All of it was engaging. All of it was super fun.
Yeah.
I love both the suzerain of propriety and the suzerain of cost and caution.
Yes. They are so much fun, and getting in their head and having the court intrigue.
Yeah.
I mean, if you like the court intrigue, this book is for you because it.
Getting inside the Gubru heads was so much fun because they really do have like an alien way of thinking.
Yep.
And it comes through. And it's not like, oh, big bad evil like stupid protagonist who's like a hate sink. No, it's like you can come and understand their point of view.
Right.
And like
100%.
they seem to have some logical goals and a society that, although it's built on some fairly conservative principles, and I say conservative with a soft C there, like they're very, very tradition oriented, still is fascinating and different and alien.
I was actually reminded of the triumvirate, like the Roman triumvirate. With,
Yeah.
That's good. Good call.
Julius Caesar and Pompey, and I can't remember the other dude's name. But they actually had a very similar relationship where they were all vying for power, but working together. I don't know. That's what I thought of when I read it.
To Kip's point about them being alien, this is going to go back to, I guess, something I think I'm going to be mentioning a lot. It's really Bryn's writing, the way he writes them on the page that makes them seem so alien. It's just like a small point, aside from like the way he kind of structures it in the book with like kind of like the words kind of fall down on the page like stairs. Whenever the Gubru use action verbs, it's always in triplicate.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
it's always whatever. Like when you open a door, you bring it forth, and then you also whatever a third verb for opening is. So they always do that. And that, huh?
I said I think I have a quote. Just a minute. Keep talking.
I definitely started writing all of my school essays in like triplicate style for a while when I read this as a kid.
That must have been really annoying for your teacher.
I was going to bring that up later, but yeah, no, I absolutely started being like, wait, why use one adjective when I could use three?
Oh, Lord. I would have pulled out my red pen and just like slashed. Too many words.
And I also say, like, flipping back to like the main client species in this book are the chimpanzees, Star Tide Rising with the dolphins. And I think the way, first of all, the neo-chimps, as they're called in the book, they're totally different than the dolphins. They're completely different species. They act very differently. Just the way I guess the cream of the crop of that species, the ones that we see most of, Fiben and Galet. The story itself is so much fun with them because Fiben, he starts off fighting in space, and then he's a spy, and then he escapes a prison, and then he's in a bare knuckle brawl fight. I mean, he's in all the cool scenes in the book. Almost every single cool scene, he's in it, and that's part of the reason. Just on the pure, hey, action part. That's what made him like the most engaging character.
So
he is our action hero. He's our spaceship pilot action hero.
Agree.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I found fascinating, you were talking about the humans and the dolphins and the chimps. So music is something that really highlights this point. So the chimps are really into rhythm, and the dolphins are really into melody, and the humans are both. They use both. And I just thought that was a really interesting way of dealing with the difference between dolphins and chimps. So they're related, but they're different. And you can tell that humans have influenced them both. But I just found that like a fascinating little touch to both books when you read them together. So anyway.
And you mentioned Athiclina before. Like, I don't want to like cut out the other really cool part of the book, which is there's a no kidding. There's a very obvious joke in the book where Athiclina, that's the Tyranny ambassador's daughter, is saying, she's surrounded by all these chimpanzees, and they're like, and all the humans are captured, and she's like, "Oh, come on, we need to find this way. What's this word you guys use for where you fight, but like you're kind of sneaking around and not letting people know kind of what you're doing?" And they never say the word, but the chimpanzees all start laughing hilariously, and it's just, oh, come on. That's
that was so great.
And I'm not going to say the word. You guys should know what the word is, right?
Yep. Don't say the word.
That's what I mean. Like, that's an example of Bryn being a very clever writer. But B, it also kind of shows the kind of relationship that Athiclina is able to develop with the chimpanzees and how she's able to lead them. I don't know. I found all of her stories and really engaging, and kind of how she went from like this bratty teenager to a war leader, and it was really cool. I really like that part of the story too.
It's definitely a big part of Bryn's writing, in that in his humor as well, that he writes something and then leaves the punchline for the reader to like infer.
Yeah.
Which I enjoy. I definitely enjoy that. I'm like, okay, you don't need to spell it out. You gave me the pieces. I see the punchline. I'm laughing at it. And you didn't have to like lower your writing to do it.
Right. And he makes tons of literary references that you can enjoy without having to necessarily know what the reference is. He references Isaiah, Shakespeare,
Yeah.
Isaiah, the biblical book, Isaiah.
And when we talk about the Timbrini later, he does this very subtle thing with his writing where he's making a meta point to the reader through the words of the Timbrini, which I caught it like on this reread. And I just wanted to stand up and just applaud Bryn for his writing ability by doing that. And I'm just going to leave that as a teaser for when we talk about the Timbrini specifically.
Yeah, we're going to talk about the linguistics later of this universe and how the Timberme have this uncanny ability to cut to the truth of difficult and complicated topics, and how to like crystallize it into a single word or sensation, which is another skill that I really admire, both of the Timbrimi and of Bryn.
Yeah.
One of the other things that I thought was really cool is that the Timbrini can rework their bodies, like, just as they need them to. And so, like, Ethelkina, she tries to make herself look more human so she fits in, and the chimps can not respect her more, but find her more acceptable. And her dad, whose name I'm not going to try and say,
Uthakalding,
is
right?
walking. Sure. He's walking through a swamp, and he like makes his feet like webbed feet, so it's easier for him to walk through a swamp. And I just thought that was kind of a neat little thing about that particular alien.
Yeah, because the Timbrimi are naturally like semi-amphibious, I think.
I think they're supposed to be marsupials, like
They
slash.
are
Yeah.
marsupials.
They're definitely marsupials, but I think they originated with the ability to like naturally swim, whereas someone like the Thenanin did not.
Well, I mean, so since Red, I think now is a good point to I guess kind of veer away, I guess, a little bit from the action. And by the way, there's a lot of action here, a lot of really cool action.
I had one more general point.
Yeah.
So I really loved what seemed kind of like an exchange student relationship between Robert and Ethelkina.
Oh yeah.
That was one of my favorite parts of this book, where like she's learning how to be more human and he's learning how to think more alien, and they combine.
Yes, that totally is something that's going on right now.
Well,
for sure.
Well, I guess one other thing too, the book gets dark, but it doesn't dwell on it, because there's a part of it where the humans do something they shouldn't have done, and so they do what they do to cover up the evidence, but they don't dwell on it. They kind of talk about it, it gets done, and then they move on. So it's not like Bryn doesn't deal with real issues. He does, but he doesn't dwell on it, I guess, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And at one point there's this child who's separated from her parents due to the war on the planet. And that part really got to me this time on reread more than it has in the past.
Yeah. No, you're right.
I don't even know if I can share the part that got to me the most, because that might be spoilers. That might have to be spoilers.
We'll just have to wait for spoilers on that. But it's a really fun book.
But like that separated child is like fairly easy to enjoy if you don't want to get that deep into it or like dwell on the darkness. That child is not unhappy or not super unhappy, definitely not on the surface.
She's a very sweet girl.
She's a very sweet girl. Very sweet girl.
And
little April Wu. Yeah.
She takes her responsibilities seriously because she has responsibilities.
Yep.
I guess last general point, Robert, that's the main human character, male human character. He's Tarzan. Tarzan. He's literally Tarzan, guys.
No. He's Playboy Tarzan.
There you go. He's Playboy Tarzan.
I mean, Tarzan was kind of a playboy.
He's better. Moving on to style. What style points do we have to make about the Uplift War?
Can I make one about the Timbrini now?
Yeah.
No.
Okay. And I am okay.
I'm just kidding.
I'm actually going to quote passages of the book to kind of show. So the Timbrini, they're known as the practical jokesters of the universe, and they do like good jokes. Okay, and they like the Three Stooges and all kinds of different jokes, but it's a little bit deeper than that. Bryn does a very clever job of seeding what the Timbrini really are throughout the book. So these are all from the viewpoints of the Timbrini. So this is first Uthacalfing, the ambassador. And I'm just going to 2 sentences. He was talking to the human, Megan O'Neill, she's the planetary governor. And he said, soon was such a wonderfully ambiguous word. One of many reasons he treasured English, the wolfling's tongue's marvelous untidiness. And this is really important because then later on, much later on in the book, Athaclina then says, here, she was trying to, she couldn't explain to Benjamin what she was up to the chimpanzee. And she says to herself, no, she cannot explain to Benjamin that she had insisted on bringing the gorillas along, on making them part of the raid as a step in a long, involved, and very practical joke. Okay?
Oh, I love that line so much.
Okay, but it's important because this goes to the ambiguity of the English language. If he had intended it to be simply a practical joke, the word practical joke would have been placed earlier in the sentence and the very would have been excluded. The very practical implies that practical is meant in the other sense of how can I achieve my goals? How can I achieve my goals? In other words, is it practical? Can I succeed at it? And you see that then work later on at the very end with the Calping.
Wait. Are we doing spoilers yet?
I won't say anything else. I won't say anything else. But besides, I'll say that, he said, oh, what interest compounded and multiplied. What a fine jest to pull upon your proud parent. And I use all those examples to say that this is Bryn as a writer at his finest, saying, hey, look, I am telling you guys, English is a squishy language and it can have multiple meanings. I am then going to use the English language in multiple ways to tell you that the Timbrini, yes, they are good at making jokes, and yes, they're funny, but they're also very ruthless about their jokes. Their jokes are intended for an intended effect to advance them forward. They're very practical-minded beings. Practical jokes, but also practical-minded. And then at the very end, when they quote the joke that was pulled ended up working way better than he ever intended. It worked way better, not because it was a joke against him, because it had the intended practical effect to a much greater degree than was originally planned. So I wanted to kind of make that point to kind of talk about Bryn does a very good job of kind of seeding a story with all these little clues. He never tells you, but he sees all these clues, and it's there for you to see that there's just different layers to look at these alien species throughout the book.
I definitely still find layers in Bryn's writing every time I read. And maybe some of that's like I forget about some of them in the years between reads, but I still feel like I'm discovering new things that I've never thought of before every time I read these books. And it's lovely. It's how you get reread value.
Yeah, for sure. So I read the book and then I started a reread. I have not finished it yet. I definitely will. But there are definitely things you notice on your second read that you don't notice on the first read. But he also has things that are just like, so Fibbin is upset and depressed, and he just sits on the bench and thinks about how all he wants is a banana and a beer. And it's just like so funny because he's totally playing into stereotype. And, there's a part where he's watching a lightning storm and needs to be inspired. And it talks about the lightning. It talks about what he's doing. And then it says he looked up and saw another electric ladder. And I just love that image of lightning being an electric ladder. And I thought it just this like
that storm sequence is very visual. I liked
it. It is.
It really is. But just that particular phrase was he needs to be inspired. He needs to rise up, and he sees an electric ladder in the sky. It's great.
I mean, to your point, it was cinematic before. Writing cinematically was a thing in these kinds of books.
Yeah. And used correctly, like cinematic moments the whole book is not written in a cinematic style, but there's parts where he focuses in and really writes a scene that you can see. And that's a major strength, while also keeping it under 800 pages.
Yes.
Era approved.
It's on the outer limit of well, for a single book, it's about 600 pages, which is I do appreciate that.
Yeah, and it is a completely self-contained story.
100%. It's complete standalone. You could read this book and be completely satisfied with it. You do not need to read it. But you were mentioning the Guru before. I think we made the point earlier, but they're so alien from how like we think and interact. And he's able to put that language down in human words, like through their dialogue, to show how they're alien. And that's really hard. I mean, that's a really hard thing to do. And he was able to really successfully do that. And tip my hat to David Brin for being able to do that.
And he does it in Dark Tide Rising, too, the way he writes the aliens. They all feel like different.
Yeah.
So
one of Brin's major strengths is that the aliens are not just humans that look different.
Right.
They don't think like humans. They don't come from a history like humans. They are alien. And when your aliens are aliens, that's good. That is good.
Yes. Yes. For sure.
And that actually, you know what, it's interesting you say that, because it actually goes to something that Tim Brin, the ambassador, mentions. It's a theme throughout the series, but especially in this book, where the ambassador's like, oh, God, these silly humans, all the answers are in the library. Why would you not want to use the library? Again, Brin never says it outright, but part of the human success or I shouldn't say humans, the chimpanzee success in Uplift is the fact that they don't use the library and have to rely on what was learned on Earth. And we can get into that more in the spoilers, but it's really interesting that he doesn't tell you, he just shows you and lets you figure it out. And I love that in a writer. I really, really love that in a writer.
Yeah. I've read 2 books recently, which it felt like some of the characters were just straight up saying what the author wanted us to learn from the book. It kind of ruined the book for me.
I'm sorry, I'm laughing because I saw you venting on Discord. I was like, oh no, it's one of those books.
The character just came out and said like, oh, everyone is valuable and blah 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 blah, and like, this is the correct moral code that I want to preach in my book. And it was coming out of a character's mouth. And fine. I guess this book is for small children.
Yeah.
But the nice thing about this book is you can enjoy it on the surface and have so much fun, but also you can think about the thoughts that are being expressed, and it's not in your face.
That's exactly true. I mean, the first time I read it, I was a teenager. I didn't see anything deeper than the story itself. And I thought this is the cool version of Planet of the Apes. The first time I read it, this is the cool version of it. Man, I love this book. And so I heard people talking about Planet of the Apes. I'm like, read the Uplift War. Like, the apes are much cooler than the Uplift War. So anyways.
It's a fun resistance war story.
Yeah.
It really is.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, so, but then again, as you reread it, as you get older, there's more there. Like, for example, I mean, I've noticed before, but like, since I'm more into the writing now and the reading aspects of it, I mean, he has this whole thing about the alienness of the human species because we use metaphors. And stop and think about that for just a second. Can you imagine thinking in a way that does not use metaphors?
No.
I mean, the alienness of the aliens itself, thinking that metaphors are strange, was a really kind of like hit you in the face moment. But it's also kind of a really cool way for Brin to kind of say, hey, I'm getting ready to play with the English language. Strap on the seatbelt and we're going to go, you know? He's telling you, hey, metaphors and the ambiguity of the English, I'm going to be playing with this throughout the book. And I love that.
And it does. And we'll get into that. We'll get into it.
We need to move to spoilers now. We've been gushing for.
Yep. No, we're moving on. Okay. Let's talk spoiler free about the setting of this world, about the planet Garth. We're introduced to the fragile world of Garth. ravaged by an ecological holocaust, but in the process of rebuilding. What did you think of the setting, planet, and what was your favorite part of it? You've already started about the vines, Red.
So the vines, they move minerals from one place to another as they're needed. They almost seem like they're presentient the way they work. But they also, it's like they're also like blood vessels in the body and like the way they move things around. So it's like, is it one vine or is it, I mean, like there was a part in my head that was like, is it actually just one big plant that's all over the planet?
Kind of like quaking aspens on Earth, where they
Right.
all connect via their roots and they're all like one big organism in a forest.
Or like mold, I think, like, or not mold, but mushrooms. Like there's like you see a bunch of little mushrooms, but there's actually like a huge thing under the ground.
Slime mold can be giant. Slime mold can cover like hundreds of acres.
Yeah. So
and be one cell, which is the crazy bit.
You can train these plants to do different things. You can, I mean, it was just fascinating, and I loved them going in the jungle and living in the jungle too. That was just fun. That was fun.
So we've got
What was your favorite part?
The jungle setting. I like Port Helenia. I like this little outpost on the mainland, which is the in-between between the populated archipelago, which we never really get to see, and the wildness of the mountains. And it's the place where these two populations mix, and it's the place where the university is. It's the place where the Gubru take over. It has the spaceport, which was a fun place to get to see. And later it has a whole bunch of Gubru fortifications and buildings. That like walled city feeling was a very walled occupied city feeling was a very interesting setting to unpack.
No, that's a good point. Because it's kind of like it's the drop of civilization in the wilderness, right?
Yeah,
that's really interesting. For me, it was the how it became a fragile ecosystem, kind of like what happened to the inhabitants that were there before, and kind of why the humans ended up being allowed to inhabit Garth, and how Garth is really a backwater in the whole scheme of things. Because just through the setting only, Bryn is able to communicate so much about the humans' place in galactic civilization, what the galactic civilization values, what's important, what's not important, and how the different alien species that he has throughout the book, how they view Garth in relation. Either they say it expressly or it's implied through their action. And I think that whole setup, because he's making this whole subtext point about ecology generally, he does it through this completely alien planet, who, to Red's earlier point, it almost functions as a singular organism. So I thought that whole part of it was really fascinating.
I think Bryn is definitely able to get points across through the setting that other authors would maybe just... I think a lot of authors would make a setting, they'd be like, okay, this is cool. This is a rainforest, which is a fun part of Garth. But like it would just be a rainforest. And it wouldn't have this like bits of history and critique of galactic culture and like this rare edge case, which is worth investigating. Of a Holocaust.
Yeah.
And he does that in this book. He does it in Startide Rising. He does it in the Uplift Storm. I think it's something that he does frequently and well.
Great. I mean, he's one of those authors that says, okay, if you read, I'm presuming you're smart enough to understand what I'm writing. You know?
Yep.
And he throws it at you, and he doesn't feel the need to explain it. Like there's obviously there's something to explain, but like the other stuff, he's gonna lay it out there, and he's going to presume that you're going to figure it out. And he does that really successfully in the setting.
But he doesn't do it for the level 1 content. The level 1 content, he's like, okay, I will set out the storyline, I will set out these characters, and I will explain enough so that you do not have any problems following the plot or the setting or the characters. You will have no problems with that. But if you want to dig deeper, it's there. The level 2, the level 3, it's there right under the surface, waiting for you to dig in.
Yep.
That's very well said. That's very well said.
Okay. Now let's go full spoilers. Is it time? Is it time?
It's time.
Come on, we're all waiting. Let's go. Come on.
It's time for Red's recap.
So, folks, we're about to get serious and spoilery. Dolphins finding a mysterious flotilla inspire a galactic war. The Gubru, bird-like creatures invade Garth, hoping to gain dominance over human territories. The human governor and the Timbrini ambassador send their kiddos into the woods for safety. A chim-led spacefight fails as the Timbrini and fellow Thinian ambassador crash land. Humans are held hostage by a mysterious gas that takes mostly only them out. Gubru assume control of Garth, and the few free Terrans are left on their own in the forest. Internal fights within the Gubru contingent, internal fights within the guerrilla warriors in the forest, internal fights within the Chim living under the Gubru, and a government in exile. And all are being led by the nose by a clever Timbrini ambassador who is pulling a very practical joke on the entire galaxy.
Can I say something right now about the neo-chimps?
Sure.
Bryn makes a very, again, subtle, because subtleties especially. So this is set approximately 500 years from the 20th century, give or take, 20, 30 years. And he mentions repeatedly throughout the book something like, to have lived in humanity's awful dark ages must have been terrible or frightening, or he mentions it several times that it would be really bad to have lived in humanity's dark ages. So to me, this is a really subtle point, because the dark ages for us is about 500-600 years ago, right?
Huh.
From our perspective, that's 500 or 600 years ago. This book is being written 500 or 600 years in the future. We are the dark ages.
Yep.
That's point one. Where we're at right now, we are the dark ages. And I think the other point he's really trying to emphasize here is, in relation to the book, the neo-chimps are where we are right now, more or less. That's kind of like the perspective he's putting in. Because if you look again, this is what I was really struck by this book, the way the neo-chimps by and large act, and we see this with Max and Galet and Sylvie and with Phibum, they act very human. Like, they're chimps, but their best responses ended up being more in line with how we would act today. And it's the humans in the Uplift War that actually, at the end of the day, to me, appear a little bit stranger than the neo-chimps in relation to us today. So that was what I was struck by.
Except Major Prothicul-Thorn, who is a throwback.
Oh, yeah. Man, that dude.
Exactly. But I think that also goes to, I think, a point Red wants to make. But because there's a lot of talk in the book, man, we are so glad we put this racism stuff behind us and this bigotry stuff behind us. We are so much better than we were before. We humans, we are awesome, great people now. And we're taking care of our chimpanzees and we're taking care of all dolphins. And we are so much better than the galactic civilization. And then you have this colonial marine major, who I'm not going to try to pronounce his name, who's like, yeah, no, I'm going to be as racist and bigoted as I want to be. And that's it, right?
And no one has stopped me.
Right.
No, I mean,
Right, yeah.
And there's a whole thing where they basically mutiny on him and throw him in a cage. He's hanging in a cage from a tree.
To be very clear, who mutinies on him?
The chimps or the gorillas. Gorillas are the ones who do it, aren't they?
The chimps and gorillas, but it takes Athaclina to do it.
Well,
to spark it.
Is
to
that
say,
why she's
no,
your favorite?
this isn't okay.
I
mean, it's one of the reasons she's my favorite. But no, that's like on the list, but not the highest. The highest is the way that she got to get Robert on Eagle. Just kidding. The highest reason that I like Athaclina is because she pulled an awesome joke on everybody, and she had the restraint. She had the restraint to do what she needed to do, not what people wanted her to do.
That's fair enough.
No, you're right.
It's true. I like her a lot. She's just Bibbin's my favorite.
If we're going to talk about favorite parts for Athaclina, I would say it was actually one of her very last acts as a general that I liked.
Yeah.
Like, that really was, I had totally forgotten about it. But when she did that and kind of gathered everybody together, and I'm like, wow, that was just an awesome moment. It showed the way she grew as a character from the beginning of the book. And I think we can all be clear, she was a brat. she was
a prig.
Complete brat at the beginning.
She was self-righteous.
Yes.
And
she calls herself
judgmental.
a prig, I think.
I call her a prig. I don't know if she does. but she is a prig.
Okay. Yeah.
But at the end, she's like, you know what? Our lives aren't as important as this planet, and if we have to die to protect the planet, so be it. And I'm sorry, that was a really, really that to me was like, wow, that shows how much she's grown.
Yeah.
It shows it really shows kind of like where her priorities are and how she was able to assume the responsibilities of an adult Tim Branding. Like her arc was really, really cool. So Kip, again, it's not that I don't like Ekathina. She's awesome. I think there are a lot of really good characters here.
Yep.
And they all kind of get their moment in the sun.
Yeah. Fibbin is awesome. I will fully agree with you there. He's a great character. And very enjoyable.
I mean, all he wants is a
his
banana and a
sections are
beer.
great. But also, this is another reason I don't like Fibbin, is because, and this is very similar to Rob on Inking Out Loud, but when there's something interesting that I want Galet to say, Fibbin interrupts her and doesn't let me learn it.
What I like about Fibbin, because I see this with people a lot, and it's usually the really, really smart people who do this. He is so self-deprecating. And he puts on this big act that, oh, shucks, I'm just this poor country boy chimp. I can barely read and write. And he is extremely bright, knows exactly what he wants and what he needs to do. And his whole aw shucks attitude is a complete act. I mean, a complete act.
He repairs a spaceship that's falling to the planet while he's in it.
Yep.
Right.
In time for him to crash land pretty close to where he needs to be.
Well, and when they're escaping, he and Sylvie, and he figures out that this is a trap because of smell, which I thought that was a really fascinating thing, because the Goober did not test smell. But that's not as much for humans, but that is something that is so important to Terran animals, but even to us. And
but
he's
not
like,
to
"I smell,
birds,
but not
interestingly.
yeah. And I just thought that was a cool little touch, and he figures it out. And then he's like, nope, we're going this way. And he's going to tear up a fence. Tears up a fence, guy. And sneaks out and collapses. And I love it. Anyway.
Let's go back to the fence, because
Yeah, let's go back to the fence.
Because the fence, to me, that was the part where Bryn made the point of, okay, these are the chimpanzees, they're alien species. You consider them, they're different. They are not human, right? And because the way he breaks the fence is he does it in a very chimpanzee way.
Mm-hmm.
He does not do it the way a human would. He does it the way a chimpanzee would. But he consciously makes that decision. And there was a fascinating way to have it presented. And I think it speaks, he's trying to pack in a lot with that scene, I think. What do you guys think?
Well, Fibbin even thinks, while humans were getting smart, we were getting strong. He has that thought.
I definitely agree that there's this part of the book which emphasizes the different evolutionary histories and heritage of each species. And part of that in chimpanzees is this fascination with lightning and storms and rhythm. And they've built up this whole bit about the thunder dance. And it's become enshrined as this cultural phenomenon, which is one of the few bastions of sexism that humans allow the chimpanzees. And it's also one of the areas where chimps first started to feel this instance of pride when the first big chim drummer came along. Igor whatever. And Fibbin says every chim knows Igor's name because he was the first time that we saw, okay, we're not just a portrait of humanity. They're not just uplifting us to be copies of themselves. They're uplifting us to value what we value as well.
Right, exactly. I think the line was, we realized we were also becoming what we wanted to be.
Yeah.
Or something like that.
And this is a good point to bring this up. This is from the chimpanzee's point of view. From the patron species point of view, I highlighted this because this, to me, said everything about where the chimpanzees and neo-dolphins are, and kind of why, part of the reason why everybody kind of wants to put humans, quote, in their place. This is from Uthicalpin, where Cal was all offended that the chimpanzees wouldn't let him in to like the spaceport. And then he said, Uthicalpin says to Cal in response, the neo-chimpanzees may be the finest clients to appear in half a mega year, with the possible exception of their cousins, the neo-dolphins. Shall we not respect their earnest desire to do their duty? So it's clear from the patron's point of view that the chimpanzees and dolphins, or this book, the chimpanzees, they're something special. Like they're a really, really special client species.
And part of me wonders if this ties into the larger system of uplift and patronage across the galaxy, in that generally species aren't allowed to get as close to sapience as the chimpanzees were when humans started uplifting them.
Yeah.
If generally they're snapped up way before that point, before they have even like a tenth as much potential.
Yeah, I think that's probably true.
If like all across the galaxy, planets are being combed and cataloged, and they are just snapping up these species at the first hint of sentience, at the first hint of the ability to think for themselves. And from then on, they're being molded into whatever the patron species wants them to be.
Right. I mean, when you look at the Kikwi, is that what they're called?
Yep.
Yeah, from Startide?
What? Oh, no. I'm thinking of the Goober's client species.
The Quaku.
Quaku.
The Quaku. Quaku. Oh my God. Quaku. Anyway, speaking of playing with
without getting it.
No, I got it before, but it cracks me up every single time. When you look at them and how much they are actually just basically quadruped reflections of the Gubru. So yeah, I think that
completely subservient.
Oh, it's kind of gross, actually. I mean, not that the humans are dealing with the chimps perfectly, but they're at least trying to incorporate the chimps' desires as well.
Yeah.
Interesting you mentioned the Quaku. Did you notice that the Quaku, they don't triple the verbs, but they double the verbs?
I did not notice that.
They double the verbs. So they were made, so the Gubru obviously made their intelligence to mimic the Gubru's intelligence to reinforce your point. But he does it very subtly. And I agree with everything that both of you said, but I also think that there's a very strong element of politics with the patron and client relationship, a very strong point. And it's mentioned a couple times throughout the book, and it's always done through the Theninen's point of view. If you recall, the prior patron species for Garth were the Nahali, or the Nahali were demoted to client species, and they were now the client species of the Theninen. So it's not like, oh, you've reached this ability to now travel on starships, you're now a sapient species. No, it's also a status symbol and a way to enforce politics. And this is further reinforced by the fact that the Theninen have been arguing, apparently for a while, pre-book, that the humans would be better off being a client species for about 10,000 years before they were allowed to truly be a patron species, even though they had already uplifted two species and had achieved starfaring status. So clearly,
which honestly I can't argue with.
Well, why?
Like why? I can't argue with the central tenet of their argument, which is humans need a bit more polish.
Well, but why can't the humans do it themselves?
I believe that the humans should probably do it themselves, and I agree with that. I disagree with the Theninen that like they should be taken under Theninen control. But I do think that humans like obviously need a couple thousand more years polish.
Well, I was going to say the Theninen could probably use a bit more polish themselves. I mean, honestly, so
they've got those awesome head crests.
They do. They have awesome head crests, and they're completely impervious to psi, which is bizarre to me. But they're so that was like a very interesting partnership with Cult and just say it for me, Kit.
Uthicalpin.
Because Uthicale is trying to. This is why I didn't want to say it. Uthicalpin. Is using his psi. He's just trying to draw Cult's attention over just look over here. He sends a little glyph over to him. Look over here. Look over here. And the dude's completely impervious. And then there's this, basically it's a squirrel. I'm going to call it a squirrel. It wasn't, but this little creature, and he just reaches out to it. And there's this moment, but it doesn't have the psi aspect. It's so weird. Anyway, I thought that was an interesting partnership because they have two very different sets of abilities and they complement each other. And they're enemies.
I think that little
Technically,
moment with the creature is a great one because it highlights the difference that Uthik Halvain would ensnare like a small creature with an empathy glyph, with an
right.
understanding of like, I can see your little thoughts and emotions, and like, look, I can replicate them and show you this crafted version of what I think you want to see. Whereas, and like, kind of mind control, kind of.
A little bit.
Whereas Cult has absolutely no psi sense, but just through motions, literally only through his actions, can he prove himself trustworthy to that little creature. And it's because he has this sense of wonder and reverence for nature and every little creature in existence that he's able to do so.
Yeah.
Can I piggyback on that? Because I think you're right, Kip. But I think it was also Bryn's way of saying there's a difference between the true believers and the fanatics in the galactic universe. The feminine are true believers. They truly believe, hey, look, saving a planet is a good thing. Uplifting species is a good thing. Now, they may be kind of super conservative in other ways, but they genuinely believe in the rightness of their actions. Whereas the Gubru, by contrast, they're fanatics and they're using it for their own selfish ends. They're using galactic civilization to achieve their own particular ends.
Well, they're actively causing ecological destruction on the planet by their behavior. And then they lock up all the humans, and the humans are the ones who manage the ecological cleanup sites. No, we're just going to throw them on an island. We don't care what kind of damage we're doing.
Yeah, this brings up a question that I was going to ask. This book has triads of characters very often, mirroring the Gubru triplicate of adjectives and verbs. There's triads of characters in this book. Halt and Uthik Halvain are a definite pair. Who would you add as the corresponding viewpoint to make it like an oppositional triad?
Oh, I thought the suzerain of propriety. That's what I thought you were going to mention.
That is who I would add too, because you have to look at it from his point of view or her point of view, depending on what time we're talking about.
Does he or she ever become a he or she?
Yes.
I don't remember.
She becomes a queen at the end of the book, but is lonely because Beeman Talon got killed.
Well, the first Kaz and Kashin got killed too.
Yeah, sad story. It was a very sad mating story for the suzerain of propriety, and I think that that's what they deserved, because although they may have had sincere and well-founded concerns for the propriety of disrupting the ecological management stations, they were unable to, really to stop the devolution of decades of work by the humans. They left Garth a worse place than they found it.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, that gets into a point, because humanity is generally viewed with contempt. I mean, let's be humanity is not viewed as like the super awesome species. Yet, these same alien species acknowledge, man, these humans, they are wizards with these ecological disaster areas. And wow, they really have these really awesome species that they've been able to uplift. So there's this strain of contempt while they reluctantly acknowledge, hey, humans do all these different things really, really well. So
contempt and jealousy. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think, at least to me, it's very clear in this book that Bryn is trying to make the point of, look, the progenitors, the original uplift species, they would have been a lot more like humans than all these other uplifted species. Because the point end of, hey, you know the way the gorillas are picking their patrons, and you know the way the chimpanzees are acting, that's a lot like how the progenitor uplift did than how we act nowadays. So I think, to your point about jealousy, I think that's why a lot of these wolfen species are ending up getting wiped out, because I don't think the current patron classes are fanatical viewpoints can accept somebody else achieving the same status without going through the process. They can't handle it. They just cannot fit their worldview.
Yeah. And again, just to mention the point that galactic moderates actually make up the majority of galactic civilization, but they're so bound up in procedure and protocol and they act so slowly that none of them are able to save humanity.
Yeah, that's
none of them are like willing to like step in and do anything.
so like this legit made me very, very angry at the beginning of the book because the Scythian ambassador who gets stink bombed by the guy whose name I can't say. She's like, "Oh, we'll go consult." And like meanwhile, they're getting bombed. Like, you can go consult. That's great. We're not going to be here when you get back.
There's like an exodus from Garth at the start of the book. And like all of the Galactics are like, let's leave. And Uthakaldin's like, I got a better idea.
Yeah. But it was just.
Which is why Tim Brimey's the only like real ally of Earthclan.
Yeah, exactly. But it was just so, I was just so angry. And I felt the same way during Startide Rising because they send this one little Scythian spy and who's just like hanging out. And she's like really legitimately frustrated because she's like, the dolphins are going to be dead by the time you decide what you're going to do. Like, what? Get your heads out of your butts, basically.
Isn't that the point? I mean,
yes.
isn't that how it actually works in real life? That like, there's normally big corporations or government takes their time to do stuff. And by the time something happens, it may be too late, right?
Yeah.
So there's get off your butt and go do something, because a through line throughout this entire book and throughout the entire series really is ecological maintenance. It's a really, really big deal. And Bryn's talking from the perch of 1987 saying, hey guys, we got to start taking care of Earth. We got to start taking care of other species. We've got to do this. And we can't just sit around and be the galactic civilization, sit around and just wait.
To your point that the Earthclan is following the progenitors' guidelines in regards to the uplift process, in that they consult with their client species and they act with what they consider to be the best of intent for them, is something that kind of gets brought up later at the very end when they're at the uplift ceremony and they're changing the uplift consort, and they say, you can choose to reject uplift at this point. You can choose to ask to be put back the way you came. The progenitors insisted on that. And then, like, kind of inside, I forget inside whose head. It might be the Sarantini, like, grand uplift, the grand examiner inside their head. They say, though that's rarely permitted.
Permitted was the word that was used.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was. I remember that.
And the acknowledgement inside the Grand Examiner's head that, oh, we've strayed from the progenitors' ideals. We've strayed far.
Yeah.
That struck me. And I completely agree with your point that humanity is indeed taking one of the most moral views towards uplift. And it is also important to note that Kalt's faction is not representative of the Thenanin at large.
Right.
But that's maybe true. Now, thanks to Uthakaldin, it will be.
Well, and can I touch on an earlier point, because I think this is going to bring up something that Red really wants to talk about.
Sure.
You're right. Compared to the rest of galactic civilization, humanity has the moral upper hand. But let's talk about how humanity actually treats their client species. Let's talk about that, because in the whole scheme of things, if this is the best that galactic civilization can offer, maybe we couldn't be doing uplift, right?
Let's talk about the low bar that is uplift morality.
Let's talk about Sylvie.
Let's talk about Sylvie. Let's talk about the fact that like 60% of chimpdom has less than a green card.
Yeah. So
wait. Can we go ahead and just reset and just briefly explain the card system and then go into it?
Okay.
Okay.
So we're in spoilers.
We're in spoilers.
Yeah. So but still, there's card systems. It goes from red to white. With red being you can't procreate at all. White you can procreate with anybody you want to. In humanity, strictly regulates who gets to procreate and who doesn't, and on what basis, and whether or not you even get to keep your kids. Proceed.
Okay.
Including mandatory sterilization for most of the population.
Yep. And mandatory birth for a huge chunk of the population.
Yes.
All the white cards. So the white card chimps are expected to have 3 children at least before they're 30.
Yep. Especially white card women who have to have them naturally.
Which is, let me tell you, I mean, I have kids. I love my kids. I'm glad I had them. That's a serious toll on your body. The process of pregnancy is.
And I don't care what future technology you have, that is a serious thing for your body to go through.
It is. And it's not comfortable, by the way. It's very uncomfortable.
Wouldn't imagine it would be.
Oh, one of my kids kicked me so hard they woke me up one time. So let's talk about Sylvie. This is the part of the book that most upset me. Like, I was seriously sobbing. So she is not supposed to. I'm trying to remember exactly how she ends up getting pregnant, but she gets pregnant, and she's told that her kid.
She was carrying a fetus which had been genetically engineered by the Uplift board as an experiment.
Right.
Which is the lot of her life. Which is the lot of everyone under a green card.
Right, yeah, exactly. And so she gives birth, and she's told that her child is probably not going to work out. But we're going to send it to Earth and give it a few more tests. And meanwhile, her mother is dying. And she's told she can go to Earth with her child, or she can stay home and take care of her mother. And there's this forced separation, and she has to choose between taking care of her mom and taking care of her kid. And then by the time her mom dies, her kid's already been adopted, and she just decides that it's better to leave her kid where he is because he's just going to be better off there. And he's already got an established life, and she doesn't want to interrupt it. And it's just like,
turn the screws even tighter, and they lie to.
Yeah.
Her son is actually on a higher card. He's a blue card.
Yeah.
So,
I don't think they lied. They intended to lie to her, but they were like, your son is most likely, like, when the testing is complete, going to be a probationer.
Right. But I don't think it was an intentional lie. But the fact that they jumped to conclusions about this little baby and basically forced a separation because there was no one to take care of her mom. And God, that was, anyway, that was one of the cruelest things about the card system and how it works. That it does that. It seems great on a big old societal level to control the population and make sure the genetics are correct and blah, blah, blah. On the very personal level, what it does to people. And there's a lot of people who want kids, and there's a lot of people who don't, but it doesn't matter. If you have a card, it dictates whether or not you're going to have children.
Yeah. There were 20 chimps on Garth, on the whole planet, that didn't have to have an Uplift person give further counseling on their children, on their genetic choices they want to make with reproduction.
Which is,
they had been pre-approved,
right?
Which is already like, it's such a patronizing thing.
Yeah.
Which is, the name of the system. But and the chimps are in an entirely different way from the dolphins. The chimps have this constantly at the center of their culture, of their thoughts, of their relationships. They have this card status. Fibbin at the start's like, I have a blue card. Does this marriage group only want me because I have a blue card and it would be like easier for them to have kids with me?
Yep.
And like, that's a real concern. Sure, first world problems, I guess, but real concern.
Am I loved for me, or am I loved because I can reproduce?
Yeah.
I mean, reproducing is like, that's why we're all here. It's a real drive, is what I'm saying.
I mean,
there's 2 points here that I think are important. One, the earlier point I made before, the chimpanzees are a lot more like 20th century humans than the 25th century humans are to us. So I'm going to put that placeholder there to kind of think about.
I will argue a couple points on that, including speech lock.
I agree,
as a thing that does not really affect modern humans.
Have you ever gotten so mad that all you could do is curse? Have you ever gotten that mad? I have.
I have to.
When you get so mad or frustrated, or you're just in tears and you just cannot express the words anymore, that happens. At least it's happened to me. So
It's happened to me too.
Maybe you're a white
Kip's never had
kid, so I don't know.
Kip's never had kids.
I've never had kids. I've never had a wife. I've never.
So I would make that point one, just to put that out there for consideration as to how we humans would have been treated if Uplift was real and aliens appeared above the sky like, tomorrow. This is how we would be treated, the way the chimps are, at best, right?
Yeah.
The second point is that I think Bryn's also making a point of, look, human history is, we've done this before. We in a soft way with socioeconomic status. If you've achieved a certain level of education and economic standing, yeah, you can marry anybody you want, but isn't the nice girl or boy who graduated from college across the street a lot better choice than the boy or girl who's a mechanic? I mean, that's the soft cultural stereotypes that are out there today.
It's like, so are you going to be a doctor? and what do they do for work? You always get the question when you introduce a significant other or you talk about them. It's like, you got to marry a doctor.
Right. Yeah. Well, and I was going to say, this is something that I remember I was dating this guy, and there was a whole bunch of reasons why I shouldn't have been with him. But I said something really snotty about how he wasn't going to college. He was studying, literally, he was going to be a mechanic. And I said something snotty about that. My mom's like, that's a really narrow-minded view. Mechanics are important, and it takes a certain kind of smarts to be a mechanic. Yeah, it's not the same as being a lawyer. It's not the same as being a doctor, but it is good, hard work, and it's important work. And like you said, we have the soft bigotry of somehow like an electrician isn't as important as a doctor.
Me too.
And electricians make a lot of money, by the way.
And for that, I'm going to talk about Max.
Oh, Max.
Wait, can I make one very last point? About uplifting, and then we'll go on.
I actually have another uplift point too, by the way.
Ooh, we're doing the whole one more thing now.
Yeah, we are.
Okay, let's talk more about uplift then. Let's talk about more about ideal patron-client relationships,
But let's not forget about Max. Max is awesome. Okay, Athaclina makes this really important point that I think goes to what we're talking about. The patrons are selecting what traits are important or not important to the species that's being uplifted. And she thinks all too often their patrons edited whimsy out of them as an unstable trait.
Oh.
Think about that.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. No,
all
that
too
hit
often.
me hard.
Yep.
And think about that. Anyways, go ahead.
And that's why the Timbrimi have this desire to protect Earthclan. Because they have more whimsy than they've ever seen.
Yeah. And the importance of, at least for humanity, the importance of having, even the Galactics, they have their myth as well as their science, and how important that is to how they focus their life is a really big theme in this book, I think, anyway.
I would like to bring in the example of the, now I'm going to say something I don't know how to say, the Titlal.
Yes.
The Timbrimi's client species. Yes. The little otter-like creatures that are also pranksters.
Which also brings up what I wanted to say earlier. So anyway, finish that. No, sorry. I got excited.
And how the Titlal choose the neo-dolphins as their uplift consorts as a practical joke, and how the Timbrimi accept that as just like a wonderful celebration that the Titlal understand what it means to be part of their clan. That they have that whimsy and that humor and that practical jokerishness. And then Athaclina's like, I saw across time, and I saw that was a presentiment of the Streaker crisis, which is like the central cause of these books, the precipitating incident, seeing that neo-dolphins are going to be at the center of this galactic crisis. I want to see more of the Titlal.
With their cute little otter hands.
I want to meet that comic that Athaclina remembers in her flashback that like she was like, he writes doggerel.
Yeah. No, that's one thing. I like how Bryn, with a very few brushstrokes, is able to kind of give you a vivid picture of a species.
So the other thing I wanted to talk about was the whole consort patron. And it seems to me that this has been put into place because of what was done on to the coughing name that you can't pronounce species from Startide Rising.
So it wasn't put into place because of them. The current it wasn't it wasn't put into place because of them, but it was strengthened. The rules around it were strengthened. Like they've gone through various phases across the billions of years of galactic history. Sometimes they're stronger, sometimes they're weaker, and it depends on like how the Uplift Institute feels that they've been doing. If no major crises have happened in a long time, sometimes they relax the rules, and then those relaxed rules cause crises to happen, and then they tighten them up again.
But I just thought it was very interesting that the client species can basically choose a different species that's not part of their clan to come up alongside and help protect them. And the end of the book is so touching because the gorillas choose the Thananin to be their primary patron, but they ask humans to be their consort patron. Is that what it's called?
Well, humans and neo-chimps.
Humans and chimpanzees.
So they're going to have just the idea that a client could say, hey, we do want to go forward, but we also want these other people to help us. And it would create a situation where species could become like what we're trying to do with the chimps in the book, become more themselves instead of more of a reflection of their patrons.
And it also shows the necessity of having at least one ally in galactic civilization.
There's that too, yes.
Because without the Timbrimia's allies, the chimpanzees and the dolphins would have consorts that are I mean, the only other option would probably be an enemy of humanity.
Yeah.
Well,
Like you either got to be an ally. They could have tried to choose one of the like moderate clans, but
maybe the Kyptan, the plant species or something like that. But yeah, no, the Timbrina are the best choice.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say like to all of those points, this goes back to my view of the patron client thing is politics. Based on what we know of Uplift through the Uplift War, if we just look at Earth. So by the book, we know gorilla, chimpanzees, dolphins. But if we look at what they consider to be pre-sentient species, I mean, we would have to include dogs, cats, all kinds of monkeys. I mean, the list goes on and on and on and on. And if you recall, like part of the reason that they had to uplift the gorillas in secret was because there was a treaty where the humans weren't allowed to uplift more species. So basically, Earth is like this right planet that everybody wants to fight for, kind of kill off humans, forget they ever existed, and have all these really awesome client species to uplift. So as a matter of just bare knuckle politics, because the more species you've uplifted, the more status you have. And so there's some bare knuckle politics being going on here that's being disguised as, oh, these wolfling species.
Yeah, no, totally. In fact, they're also uplifting dogs on Earth. There's this like really quick scene in the book where like this earthling dog is like really confused and it's talking about its thought process. So humans are basically breaking all the rules.
Well, I think humans had started some experiments on dogs and cats in the Uplift universe before Contact.
Okay.
But then after Contact, they were forced to abandon those efforts. But
so
not all dogs or cats like went fully back to the way they were.
Oh, okay. I just remember
which
that
is
part being
its
funny.
own little tragedy.
It is. It made me sad.
Yeah.
Because the dog was so like close to understanding. It was like a really, really, really smart toddler, but it was just really confused by what was happening to it. And I can't remember something about a doily.
But compare and contrast that to what we know about like the Tandu from the previous book. I mean, the Tandu are borderline abusing their client species to achieve a desired result, right? And so
I mean, I don't think it's borderline. I think it's pretty
full on abusing.
Okay, well, the point being that yes, like we sit here and talked about the awful ways humans may have been treating chimpanzees, and they are, but relative to the other patrons in the galaxy, humans are borderline saints. Now that excuses their actions, but it kind of puts it in context, and I think the context is important.
Humans are doing the best they can while also adhering as away with to galactic standards of uplift.
Yeah.
It's made very clear that the humans do not system. Most humans don't like the restricted reproductive rights, but those are basically requirements of galactic civilization. And galactic civilization thinks that they're being insane by allowing chimpanzees and dolphins as much leniency and rights as they have.
Yeah. So let's talk about Max, man.
Let's talk about Max. Let's
Max is
talk
awesome.
about the unsung hero.
Oh my God, he's a gosh darn hero.
The only point I want to make about Max is that unsung is the important part here, is that we have all these chimpanzees who we don't see. They're off screen. But you probably have more than one Max out there on Garth who are acting as a true sapient species and doing things despite, like, let's be frank, that the discrimination they're receiving is not being considered a sentient species. And I just love what Max represents. I'll let you guys talk.
Well, no, that was one of the things that was most disturbing, is that the goober basically told the chimps that they weren't sentient, and they took away all their free will and choice and stuff, and it was just so upsetting. So Max gets captured, and he very cleverly thinks about Garthlings in order to further the practical joke that the Tim Brenny ambassador starts. He's like, I don't want to think about Galatia. I don't want to think about Fibrin. I'm going to think about Garthling myths while they're trying to read my mind. And I just loved it. I just loved it so much. And he's getting tortured to death, and it's so sad, but it's great.
And he broke free and caused a whole bunch of destruction before he finally got captured.
Yeah, he did. Good on him.
He thought through his position very logically. He almost succeeded. He was only stopped by one of our major antagonists of the book, Iron Grip, and only by his insane genetic modification, which granted him much increased strength.
And he's basically a mechanic. In fact, I'm pretty sure he is a mechanic, isn't he?
Iron Grip?
No.
Max?
Max. He's Max.
He's
a green card for sure.
He's a retainer.
Maybe a yellow. Yeah, he's a retainer.
He's a retainer. He's a man of many trades.
I was about to say, I think it's important that Max is classified as a green card. I mean, if how Max acted is not a sign of somebody who can procreate however he wants, I mean, something's wrong with the system. I mean, I mean, he acted very logically. He acted ruthlessly. He acted with humor and with honor. I mean, you couldn't ask anybody to do more than what Max did. Really, I mean, he went above and beyond. He died for it. I mean, he was a really awesome character.
Yeah, and I just love that his last dying blow was, like I said, he was thinking about Garthlings, which don't even exist, just to screw with them one more time before he goes.
And he was as he died, he was laughing.
Yeah,
I view the card system as broken as basically any standardized testing system, which is very broken in my opinion.
Yeah, but it's like one of those things. It's like we
has some value, has some like use, and is kind of required by galactic civilization in this case, so I can excuse its existence. But it's not a reliable classification unit that tells you much about any person. Sylvie was not always a green card. Max is a green card. Fibin is a blue card, and then a white card. These things change. They get like who someone is gets revealed, and it changes their class status. And that is, ideally, it's not something that should have to happen.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
The other thing about Max that I liked is that there's a kind of another through line through the book is what makes each species different, like what makes them, for lack of a better word, unique. On Max's end, he was able to retain his sentience despite the extreme circumstances he was in.
Yeah. Oh, incredibly, yeah.
Fibin, on the other hand, realized that the way to accomplish his goals was to get more in touch with his animal side, right? His more primitive side.
Yep.
So I think that's a very interesting thing. And then, like, I find that how all the chimps acted, and then contrast that with, let's say, the Timbrini and the humans. The Timbrini are known as they can adapt to anything. They're practical jokers, and we see how their bodies physically adapt to everything, and they do all that. And it's really interesting how he tries to differentiate the uniqueness of the species. And I've been struggling with, so Bryn makes the point that humanity's uniqueness is they never give up. We have a lot of endurance, and we never do all this. But that's kind of not what I was left with after this read. I know that's what he's saying, but to me, it was the humans' adaptability. They went back and used crossbows and made bows and arrows and just made do with what they had. They used the metaphors that they had from their past and didn't rely on the library to succeed. And I don't know if Bryn was trying to say something more than that, but when you're talking about Max, I kept on being struck by all of human species, the dolphins and the chimpanzees and the humans have this ability to adapt to dire circumstances and to persevere through it. That I don't know whether he's trying to say something, but it's just something I really noticed this time around.
Okay, this goes into my favorite point that I wanted to make.
Okay.
I'd like to deep dive into the linguistics of the world and make an argument about the way that Bryn looks at language. I don't think it's controversial to say that he seems to be an adherent of the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis that the structure of a language determines the native speaker's perception and categorization of experience. Bryn categorizes species partly by the languages they speak. Earthclan has Anglic, Chimps have Hand Talk, Neophins have Trinary and Primal, Timbrimi have Galactic 7 and Glyphs, the Gubru have Galactic 3, the Thenanin have Gal 6. Did you feel the importance of these languages in the writing? And what do you think Bryn is trying to say about them?
Red, do you want to go first?
Oh no, I'm so unqualified to talk about this.
Okay.
But here's something I will say. I loved that the chimps were able to fool the Gubru because they could hand talk, and that's just something that wasn't even in the Gubru's brain. That they used sign language to defeat their supposed betters.
That they could have 3-level conversations.
Yeah, exactly. I thought that was great.
Yeah, I think Bryn's math, like this is one of the things that it's really a strength of his, that he uses haiku to express dolphin trinary, or the triple verbs for the Gubru, and so on and so forth. I think he does a really good job of showing the alienness of thought without having to explain it. He just shows it to you by how they act and the words on the page about like what they're thinking or what they're saying. So I think that does a really good job of that. And to the point about, like, for example, the languages that are more direct, like Gal 6 or Gal 7, Thenanin are known as very dour. And they're very direct and very, like, relatively logical, right? So they don't have the ability to understand metaphors or understand jokes. And the reason that the Timbrini are is apparently through their ken, through their glyphs, right? Whereas humanity's language is so squishy, right, that they can mean multiple things even though they're only saying one thing. I think the alienness of thought is really expressed well through the species and the way they express themselves. There's a part of the book, I think Athaclina is talking, where she's like, yeah, or maybe it was Robert, everything's just boring sanity when you're thinking about things in terms of like one of the galactic languages. There's no, basically there's no poetry to it, right? It's just, why does a star shine? Well, it shines because of this scientific process. There's no, well, the sun god rose. No, this is what it is. It's a very direct language. So anyways, those are my unformed kind of thoughts just spilling out.
Yeah, Athaclina is like, I've never looked at my change nodes like they're mice burrowing under my skin because I've never had metaphors before, and this is unsettling to me. And then the ways that she talks about and thinks in metaphor starts influencing more and more her internal patterns, such as her glyphs, including I cannot say this one, the glyph of indeterminacy postponed to Tutsunikan, something like that.
Sure. We'll
Don't ask me.
And I think that Bryn is saying that these galactic languages are so fossilized and stultified, kind of like Newspeak from 1984, that they've locked galactic society into these different ways of speaking. And even Galactic 7, which is the Timbrimi favorite because it's the most like fluid, flexible, and lyrical of the galactic languages, Bryn notes that the Timbrimi, they inflect the syllables in a way that kind of makes it sing-song. That seems very Timbrimi to me. They're a species of space poets. But the Timbrimi also have the interesting phenomenon of their glyphs, where they can take psychological or basically psychic emanations and craft them into this form of psychic poetry. And they use that to express their complex beliefs. And it's like very central to their culture because it allows them to say things that wouldn't, they don't fully have a corollary in the galactic languages. It's their own thing that they've invented. And although they've used the galactic languages to structure their thought, they have this other thing too. And it gives them like a degree of flexibility, a degree of tricksterdom. But I also found really interesting that these glyphs, they tend to express very true concepts, very interesting concepts, very deep, very self-aware, very psychologically mature concepts. Like your mother can just instinctively hold up the dark reflection of yourself to you and teach you as a child that like,
Right.
no, you're projecting right now. Like that seems useful, but it also is just true. Whereas Anglic is a language that has ways of expressing anything, true, untrue, complete falsifications. It's got metaphor, which insists that things are the same, not that they're just like each other, but no, they are the same. And that linguistic shift, which Uther Calding delights in, and Athaclina has kind of forced upon her, not entirely like with her own consent or will, because it was kind of an accident.
Yeah, it was just
she went into Robert's head and like accidentally they gave pieces of each other to each other. And Athaclina learning to deal with the inspecificity, with the wolfling way of thought, I think is a major point of how Bryn looks at language and how it can control who you are.
I agree, and to buttress that point, Athaclina becomes, relative to other alien species, more creative after her
encounter.
She does.
Encounter with Robert. Like, significantly more
flexible.
Creative. There you go. Flexible. I like that word better. Yeah.
She becomes even more adaptable.
Yes, mentally adaptable. Adaptable. Because that's to your point, is that these galactic civilizations with their language are definitely, I like that word fossilized, because they're unable, there's a level of incomprehension regarding the human species and all the clan species with them. They look at them, we say something, and it's literally like humanity's talking gibberish to them. They just don't have the capacity to understand. And that has to do with the language structure. That's a really good point.
Well, I was going to say, and this is probably a garbage opinion, but I'm going to say it anyway. It's kind of like Latin, because once Latin went out of common use, it got super codified, and now it's a dead language. That's how you kill a language, is by codifying it to an extreme point. Not that I'm a total believer in grammar, Oxford, me, but what I'm saying is that when it stops being used in real life.
But these languages are being used in real life constantly.
I know.
Here,
it was like I said, it was a garbage opinion. I have a garbage opinion.
No, it's not garbage.
Not garbage.
It's not garbage opinion. Here's what I'd say: that do either one of you speak another language besides English?
Vaguely Spanish.
No.
Okay, so I'm fluent in Spanish, and I'm not doing that to brag. I'm doing that to say, to buttress Kip's point, or hell, like in my job, I'm a lawyer, right? So in both of those instances, when I'm talking to my family in Spanish, like I'm thinking in Spanish, and the way I think in Spanish is different than the way I think in English. Like, it's a very different thought process. It's more circuitous and less direct. At least when I do it. When I'm at my job, right? You think English is vague and ambiguous. Like in my job, every word's ambiguous. It's not that way when I'm just kind of like talking to my family or talking to my friends. I don't do that, right? But you put on your hat for your profession, and all of a sudden, like, the way you understand things is radically different because the language you use for that profession. I use lawyer because that's me, but like whether you're a scientist or a doctor or whatever.
I put on my science hat when I'm writing like a report or a paper.
And all of a sudden, like you're thinking in a completely different way, right? Because you're using the language of science.
Yep.
I think it's a very fascinating point that you brought up, Kip, and I agree with you. And I agree with you. I think that's what Bryn's trying to say by expressing these different languages. But again, it's one of these things where he never tells you this. He's showing it to you, right? And then you've got to, is there to be seen. You just got to, It's a fascinating point.
It's absolutely there to be seen. He does tell you the point about the metaphors, because he wants you to get that.
Oh.
He helps you along the way, but he never says his point.
There's only one part at the end. Galet, when he does her speech to everybody at the end, that's his one preachy moment of the entire book. That's his only preachy moment of the entire book, where he kind of makes the point of, hey, look, we got to save the Earth. We got to save, the planet. We got to be more careful about things. But that's the only time he ever gets preachy. The rest of it is exactly to your point.
I will entirely agree with that. The end of the book gets a little preachy.
That's it. And actually, here, look, I'm going to read. Do you guys have the postscript acknowledgments in your?
Not my audio.
I did, yeah.
Okay. He actually makes a point to talk in the postscripts. Here, I'll just read this really quick. In order to teach an ethic of environmentalism. It is now well known that our very survival depends upon maintaining complex ecological networks and genetic diversity. If we wipe out nature, we ourselves will die. That's just one paragraph, but he has like a whole page about the ethics of environmentalism. So hint, this is a big theme of the Uplift War in particular and the Uplift Saga in general.
Yeah, no, those acknowledgments are good, and they're short.
I only bring it up to say that we're not reading something into existence that isn't there. He's making the point, and then afterwards he says, hey, this is the point I'm making. So yeah. Go ahead, Kevin.
The end in general is a little pat. There's more loose threads tied up in a positive manner than I remember having been tied up in the past.
Oh, don't be a killjoy, Kip. Come on. Sometimes it's nice to have an ending like that.
Little bit of a killjoy. Yeah.
I mean, I agree with you. It's a little pat. That's okay.
I do really enjoy how even Kalt, the most serious of the Thenans, is like, wait, I have to be allied with Earthclan now, but that risks my race's extinction. And Uthakalian is like, now you get what I've been in. We're going to be allies now, buddy.
Welcome to the club. And let's talk about that just incredible practical joke that got played on the entire 5 galaxies. Basically, Uthaklening. I try.
You tried.
I tried. He lays all this false. He knows about the wolfling, mysterious. It's almost like a Bigfoot legend, basically.
The Garthling, yeah.
Yeah, the Garthlings are basically a Bigfoot legend. And he knows about it. And so he lays all of these false clues to make the entire galaxy think that the gorillas are, in fact, the Garthlings. Gets humanity out of trouble and creates this beautiful chaos and gets the gorillas a great patron. And I love it.
Red, I'm going to disagree a little bit. I don't think the Uthakalian. Well, no. I agree with everything. I don't think Uthakalian knew the gorillas existed.
No, he absolutely did not.
He did not know the gorillas existed. He did it as a false trail to kind of confuse the 5 galaxies. And then
to confuse the Gubru, to get them to waste money looking for it.
Right. And then
it happened that the gorillas were there. Oh, okay.
At the end, he's like, oh, what a great gist you pulled on me, Athaclina. Oh, wow. You made my joke be real. This is the best thing ever. That's kind of like what that was his point at the end of, wow, you took my joke and you took it to 11. This is great.
I'm dumb.
What interest repaid?
Yes, and
I missed that part. I thought he knew the gorillas existed.
Gets to the earlier point I was making about it's a practical joke. It's it's a great joke. It's also a very practical joke in that now the Thenanin are allied with the Earthlings and the Timbrini, and they have more firepower on their side and will enhance their chance to survive. It worked as a practical matter to enhance their species survival.
Yeah.
But he at least started the joke for sure because he wanted them to chase down ghosts.
Uthakalian absolutely started the joke. And then Athaclina, when she first went down onto the Nahakieri level to find out if he lived or not, she got a little glimpse of the joke, and then she started to play into it. And then Max had no idea of the joke, and then he played into it. And when he was in the hyperspace shunt, he projected out to the gorillas and out to Athaclina. And that was also when Athaclina had her Suistros Thun storm with Uthakalding, and took from him, except part of Uthak
went into
like
Robert.
Self went into the gorillas.
And it also went into Robert too, didn't it? I think Robert got part of that.
I don't know if Robert got any of it.
That was
possibly.
Yeah.
I don't think so, though.
I think he did. I think he did.
Okay.
Part of it.
Very possibly he did. I mean, Athaklina and him were connected. If the gorillas got something, then he probably got something too.
Anyway. Well, I feel dumb because I totally thought that he knew about it at the beginning, but whatever.
But that's what made the gorillas then storm the mound.
Yeah. Is what Max said. Yeah, exactly.
It was Max. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'll put you this way: the first time I read it, I don't recall it anymore, but I bet I thought that that he knew about the gorillas too. It's just you have to reread it a couple times before you realize that part I quoted earlier, where Athaklina said, "Oh, I'm going to make this a very practical joke." That's when she was saying, "I see what my dad wants to do. I'm now going to take it, and I'm going to take it to 11 now. I'm going to use the gorillas, and I'm going to make them be the mythical Bigfoot species on this planet." And it fooled everybody because remember the Gubru, they were like, "Oh crap, this is fake. We're going to have to use the neo-chimps in their place to kind of make up for all the lost space that we have now, right?" So it worked, but then it worked even better than Uthak even wanted it to work.
Yeah. So, I wonder if because like I said, I haven't gotten to the end on my reread. I wonder if I reread the end now, I would have realized it. Oh well, whatever. I misunderstood. It happens.
And it all played out in front of all of galactic society because the hyperspace shunt was active.
Yep, it was beautiful. I mean, the end is just, I'm sorry, I love the end. You're right, it is Pat. I don't care. I just don't care that it's too Pat. I just don't care.
It's happy for Garth.
It's happy.
This is a Rafo moment, but here's what I'll say. I'll take it, Kit, because this is the happiest ending we're going to get. Like, this is where all the threads get wrapped up. Okay.
It's the end of this trilogy.
Right. So I'm fine with it. I'm fine with it. Right. So.
Yep. I mean, Sundiver, not a happy ending. Startide Rising, not really a happy ending. Uplift War, happy ending. Finally. Yay. Yeah. It can be Kip's favorite.
What about favorite scene?
Favorite scene. This is going to be interesting. It's when Athaklina and Robert are sharing their like little psychic moment together, and Lydia McHugh is like off to the side, not knowing what the hell is going on. And Athaklina's like, "Yeah, we got something you can't share either."
Cool. Yeah, that's a good one. That's a good one. What about you? What about you, Red?
That's such a little moment.
Well, it is because it's so petty, but it's also awesome. Yeah,
I love it. Said my favorite scene too. It's probably the prison escape.
Really awesome.
But
that lightning storm.
Yeah, the lightning storm. And like I said, it had that one really great little phrase in it, about the electric ladder. I just love. I don't know why, but that just really is in my brain. What can I say? I'm a weirdo.
Let me ask this for that particular scene. So I got the impression that Five is at least mildly empathic.
Yes.
Do we think that there's any psi involved in the lightning actually prison, or was that just pure happenstance?
There absolutely was.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Absolutely was. Being impacted by Max again.
Yeah, because I could not figure. I mean, I read it and I'm like, is he hinting at? Because again, Bryn doesn't tell you anything; he just shows it to you, right? And I couldn't figure that out whether that was a hint or not. So good. Okay, I was wondering.
They do say like the Gubru were testing their machinery, and they let loose wild surges of probability.
Yep.
And I think that one of those surges of probability took form of the place of a lightning strike, exactly where Fibbin needed it to be.
Yeah. Okay, I'll buy that. I'll buy that 100%. Yeah, that's good. I'm going to go with a simple scene, but I think that one that kind of presses that happens in the book. Do you remember when the gorillas were eating parts from the downed Gubru ship?
They were chewing on it, yeah.
They were chewing on it, right? Then Robert's like, "What are you chewing on?" And they go on to explain that, like, this plant softened up the parts so the gorillas can chew on it, and it was all good, right? And then it gets mentioned. It doesn't get mentioned at all again until near the very end, where the Suzerain of Beam and Talon has just gone rogue, right? And then there's a part where his subordinates are like, "We can't aren't available. What's going on? Well, now they've all been infected with these spores from this plant that somehow traveled throughout all the ecosystem, which have now made all of our ships unavailable and unusable. And I love that. I love the foreshadowing he did by talking about how Garth, to Red's very earliest point, was like this one gigantic organism, right? And then he kind of gives you the clues with the spores, but then he doesn't tell you at all what's going to happen or anything until it's actually done. So I love
he's very cute about that.
Yeah. I was gonna say the prison escape scene is perfectly foreshadowed by the scene where Fibbin goes into the bar, and it's when he first meets Sylvie, and they have the thunder dance, and everything goes out of control during the thunder dance and gets crazy, and then he's climbing up, following her up as she's leaving the bar, and then he gets
I never thought of that. That's good.
But it stood out very probably because I read the two scenes. I read the first.
And he said that like the only winning move is to cheat.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. And it's like a perfect. But it's not in your face. It doesn't smack you when you read the prison scene, but when you reread the book, you see it.
Yep. I was not expecting Sylvie to show back up in the book when I met her the first time. The first time I read this, I was like, okay, we've got this chim stripper, and that was an interesting character, I guess. Moving on.
And she and oh no, another name, Galatia. I mean,
Galet.
Sorry, Kip. Galet work out like basically a marriage contract, and they didn't even consult Fibbin. They're just like, oh, you'll have sex with either one of us. So
you're a man.
A leaf.
A leaf, exactly.
I just want to say, we always hear a lot about how poorly women are treated. I just want to say, hey, look, Fibbin isn't treated exactly great.
No, he's not.
Screw a leaf. Come on.
I mean, I think they're joking, but also
it's kind of true.
He's not great either. Like he is horrible at articulating what he wants, and very offensive when he does it often.
I mean,
though Galet made him able to talk to Galactics, though.
Yeah.
I'll tell you somebody who I ended up being surprisingly sympathetic with. I was not expecting this at all this time around, but it was the suzerain of propriety.
Oh, he's been one of my favorites for a while.
Is she?
What was it? He at the start or in the middle?
Okay.
Was it he?
I don't know.
Yeah.
It's very confusing. We never talked about that, by the way, about how their sex works.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess for me, like, it was earlier on in the book than I remembered, because there was that little part where the suzerain of propriety realizes, crap, cost and caution.
Yeah.
He was the best of us. Like, we're not going to succeed now. And I was like, wow, it was such a fascinating thing for Bryn to put in there, and then to kind of express it and then kind of move on. And you're like, wow, I actually feel some sympathy for these jerks. So let's go.
I felt really sorry for the suzerain of propriety right after the suzerain of Beam and Talon got killed. It's not my favorite moment of the book, but it's a really poignant moment where it slowly sings to itself about the triad that it will never have because one of its mates is dead.
Oh.
And the whole idea of the Gubru putting basically the hope of their species on this one triumvirate, on this one little planet, which Cost and Caution thought it had in the bag because they'd done like all of their modeling to say that the only way that the Garth triumvirate would be successful would be if Cost and Caution won primacy. It might have been right.
Well, it had studied the Earthlings. It had studied,
and it had studied the Earthlings. It was a bit of a reform movement. It was saying, okay, we've got to rethink the way that we think about the humans because they have value that we're not acknowledging.
Right, and he had learned English,
and we're being blinded. Yeah.
And when it died, I don't know if it was a he at the time, but when it died,
it was still neuter.
And it was like a weird accident, weird explosion. Fibbin was,
but it was winning. It was
winning.
on
It was
top
winning.
position. Yep.
Yeah, I know. And then like this weird, he just happened to walk into a building that was getting bombed, and they weren't even trying to kill him. It just
They weren't even trying to blow it up.
That's true.
It just blew up.
It was like, oops. And then yeah.
Another thing that I wanted to bring up was that Bryn very, very carefully the expansiveness of the universe by hinting at a few times machine species and hydrogen species and all these other species that are completely separate and apart from the 5 galaxy species, right? The oxygen breathing species. And I love the way he did it, just through, it's a casual mention in the library here. Somebody mentions, hey, I was at this diplomatic conference and there were these hydrogen breathers there. And there's no further explanation. They're just mentioned and they move on. And whoever's listening kind of goes, God, I wish I knew more about it. And it's like, yeah, that's it. That's all you get.
Yep.
And that's all you get, right? And
really?
I love it.
That's all you
I
get?
love it.
I mean,
that's all we get in this book.
Okay.
Maybe there's more.
Yeah.
Who knows?
Yeah, obviously.
Read, find out.
And so here's something that Kip said to me in our chat, and I don't entirely buy. Why can't we have uterine replicators? I know we have IA, like civilizations that are IA, but I still don't understand why we can't have uterine replicators. We clearly have the technology. I'm just saying, I think it's unfair.
The presumption has to be, and I'm presuming this based off of what we know about the patron client species and the library and everything. The presumption has to be that they have tried using mechanisms other than natural birth and have found that the optimal method of uplifting a species is through natural birth. That's the only thing that would make sense given the library.
I don't.
That's not my presumption.
Okay.
My presumption is that there's this central tenet of uplift that says that you can't alter a species so much that they can no longer give birth naturally.
I'm not saying we should get rid of uteruses.
No. And tied up in that, like in that tenet of faith, is because that is a tenet of faith. Like,
right. Okay.
There's no moral problem in like transitioning a species over entirely into uterine replicators if that technology works and is not too onerous to do. But the practical and moral thing, given the morality of the 5 galaxies, is that doing so would be unnatural, and that making a species that like isn't perfectly fine giving natural birth is against the like biological oxygen breathing civilization.
Okay, I guess I can buy that a little more. I still don't like it. I still think that because
it's like semi-Darwinist.
Yeah, but so I guess part of what bothers me about it is that the white card female chimps have to give birth 3 times, and I'm like, that is, and I'm sorry, that's the 3rd time. That's crappy, and why can't we do something to fix it to make it easier for just physically easier instead of just saying you have to have 3 babies?
Well, they could make it physically easier. They can make it easier for the female chimpanzees to give birth if they want to. That could be on the agenda. We don't know, right? Remember that the neo-chimps are 400 years into a 100,000-year process, which, again, I don't think it takes 100,000 years to uplift the species because, I mean, they make the point that the Kwaku are basically kind of doing stuff on their own, just under Gubru direction, and they're 50,000 years into the process. But anyways, the Gubru still retain the right to meddle in their genetics for another 40,000 years. So
I'm just saying,
there's a definite implication that like you're kind of incentivized to get your uplift done early in the 100,000 year period, and then you have the rest of the period to make use of them.
Yep, that's exactly right.
As opposed to taking the full 100,000 years to actually like slowly perfect them.
I'm just saying, it's something that bothered me the whole book. I was like, this is not fair. It is not fair.
And it should.
It upsets me because I know what it does to your body to be pregnant.
Yeah.
But there is the like horrible moral point to say,
yes,
the like eugenics point to say, which is like if you're using uterine replicators, you're not getting good data about how the species handles childbirth.
Okay, I mean, whatever. I'm just saying. I'm registering my complaint.
Which is horrible. But yeah. That is not a good moral argument.
No, it's not. But I understand. I think I understand why. I don't agree with it, though.
Yep.
Anyway.
No.
Get off my soapbox.
It's a stupid prejudice that galactic civilization has.
Okay.
That's it in my book.
Well, we've been at this for 2 hours, boys.
Okay, I just want to make one last cultural point. I love how Bryn, one of the curse words that the chimpanzees use is "Oh Goodall."
Yes, I love that.
For Jane Goodall, I love that. So anyways, I just thought that was just a very clever way to differentiate the species, going back to the linguistics point. So that's it.
I did like that reference to human treasure, Jane Goodall. Yes.
It was definitely great.
Okay, some quick rapid fire questions. Favorite species? Mine, Tim Brimmy. Athaclina and Uthicalding. Need I say more? Red.
Chimps, Fibbin and Max. Need I say more?
Era.
Garthlings.
Okay. And we've done favorite individual, so I think we're good.
I think so.
Okay. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. Join us on the Discord, Reddit, Twitter, Patreon. Thank you, Horizon Brave, for starting this all. And thank you, Red, for reading this with Era and me. I know it can't be easy, but thank you.
I love you guys.
Thank you for
I love it. Have a
Goodbye,
good night.
everyone.